Hello, welcome. I am joined by Amber from the YouTube channel Road to Tar Valon, and we are going to discuss Wheel of Time Season 3. Um, I always joke, and Carmine and I joke about this, that we've got a guy. I don't know if you've I used to live in the Middle East, and like things like you always had a guy for everything. Like, oh, these are really great kebabs. Where did you get them? Oh, I got a guy. Oh, is that tailored? Yeah, I got a guy. And so here with our expertise on various
Oh, thank you.
yes. We've got a Lord of the Rings guy. We've got you're our Wheel of Time guy, gal. So
Either or.
yes. So here we're discussing Wheel of Time season 3. It came out. First 3 episodes are up. I watched them. It's and I'm gonna say, as someone I've read the first book. I haven't read the rest. Um, it's a bit of a fire hose, I would say, jumping into season 3 now. I mean, granted, it's been a year and a half since season 2. Season 2, I could wrap kind of my head around all the characters and everything, but season 3, they've really dumped even more. Um, I
I was
it's
expecting you to
yeah,
say this. I
yeah.
fully was expecting you to say this. It's a
Uh,
lot and it's fast.
it's a lot and it's fast. I will say first things off the bat, my first impressions of Wheel of Time. And it's hilarious because different shows, like, people have the impression of the show from the people that have not seen it, and they're like, Wheel of Time
Yeah.
is trash. I'm like, no, it's like it's not. Certainly seasons 2 and 3. I wouldn't describe season 1 as that, but even seasons 2 and 3, like, it's amazing how much money they're now dumping into it. It is a beautiful, beautiful show. Season 3, and I thought season 2 they went overboard with how the filming on location, and I was just like, oh my god! Like, every scene, I'm just like, what are they dumping into this? This season, they've got all these incredible locations and so many characters, but the thing that they've really gone crazy on is the costumes are out of control this season. What happened to the
What's
costumes?
your Okay, tell me your thoughts. Is it what's too much, I
I don't I
guess?
don't think it's I don't think it's too much, because it's imaginative and creative.
Mhm.
But it's so different from the previous seasons. Like, the first season, you had very simple medieval drab garb. Okay.
Okay.
And then the
Okay.
second season, it was more ornate, Orientalist. We're exploring the world kind of garb.
Yeah.
And now it's a bit kind of outrageous, ostentatious, like these women with these dresses that go with collars that go out like this, like all sorts of crazy hats. Rosamund Pike
Yeah.
wearing floppy hats in the desert. It's
Oh
just
no, the floppy hat. Okay,
it's
I will say this. I can see where you're coming from, but I also think in season 1, it felt really medieval, and I think that was the wrong choice because it's not supposed to be. It's I mean, if you're looking at this series, it's supposed to be a combination of our past, like our world past, far distant past and far distant future. And so each one of these new cultures and locations that's introduced should be kind of like a big merging of like different real world cultures. So like as they've gotten away from that, it's starting to feel different and like look a lot different. But again, that
yeah.
could really throw people off if you're expecting to walk into like a very medieval typical fantasy.
One of the
But
things
the
that
floppy
occurred
hat.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that occurred to me, that if it is an intentional choice versus you've got a budget
Mhm.
now, go crazy.
Yeah.
One of the things that occurred to me was that if we're doing the cycle of time, and we did have a few
Right.
flashbacks to previous cycles where
Mhm.
it's where people are dressed in modern clothing, and
Yeah.
I could say if it was intentional, it's interesting that they're moving their characters towards the modernity, as if like the
Yeah.
wheel is moving, because it's not
Mhm.
just that they're going to different places. Like our characters are dressing more modern. Specifically, Rand and Egwene, like definitely are
Yeah.
dressed more modern. Matt looks like fucking Matt, whatever. But like, but
Staying consistent.
right, he's got his like long sleeves, and it's just whatever. Um, but yeah, that's the thing that's striking is one, it's very clear how much money they're dumping into it. Um, the number of characters and the complexity of plot has gotten pretty hard to handle. Um,
Okay.
and but on a positive side, I would say what I like about the season so far is the reshuffle. The reshuffle
Okay.
of characters. I think the reshuffle of characters is fun. It's just fun. One of my favorite parts of Ice and Fire is when Stannis makes it to the Wall, and you have all of the characters from the Davos story now shuffled into the Jon story, and then they get shuffled into the Asha story, and I think that's so fun when you reshuffle the characters to see how they interact.
Yeah. New
So
dynamic, new
yeah,
ways to get a take on same old people. Yeah.
right. So I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. I think, um, though I think that the by far Matt's character and I would say Elaine's character are the most interesting, and
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
and they have the most personality, and so everyone else can be, I don't know. I mean, obviously, like Leandrin is
Mhm.
pretty outrageous, and who's the X, the dark X, Celine,
Lanfear.
Lampier. Yeah, yeah. So I said
Yeah.
Celine. Was that her name too? Yeah.
Yeah.
She's interesting, but a lot of people are just it's the same dour.
Okay. What is it about Elaine, can I ask?
I don't know. There's something very sassy about her, and
Yeah?
sassy and interesting. She's always getting
I
into
love her.
trouble. Yeah,
I
she's
love
get.
Elaine.
She has her brief little relationship, and then she has her relationship with her parents and her brothers, and she has some interactions with Matt. She she's a little sassball, and that's interesting to me. She has some color. Um, because because I don't know, like Rand and Egwene and Rosamund and Lan, they're so fucking stiff, and Nynaeve is stiff, and Perrin is stiff, and it's like sometimes I'm just like, oh man, just give me back to somebody that has a little personality. Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I think Elaine, I don't know, I really like the introduction of her family into the story because, like you said, she's a sassball, and then you've got her brothers who are even more like over the top. So, like, her whole family dynamic is pretty interesting, even though, like, her mother, uh, it, in the books, a lot of them are either given like more time or less time at this point. So like they're throwing so much of all of this at you so fast. And then like the covering of this season, it's roughly one book, but
Mm.
previous seasons you're doing like two books and
So
one
we're now
eight
on
season
are we
episode.
on the fourth book in the third season?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like they're really what I noticed in these 3 episodes, it's moving at this, like, very, very fast pace into a book reader. It kind of gave me pause where I'm like, "Oh, no." Like, what are we gonna skip something? Like, what's
Yeah.
happening?
It's it
I've
was
seen
it was a bit intimidating that the show begins and it's fucking 50 characters running into a room with 50 other characters and having a fucking Royal Rumble. And half of them are dying off, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, it's a lot to start the show. Like, oh, Jesus.
I really liked the opener, though. I mean, this was a huge moment of the books that we only get to hear about and not actually see on page.
Oh,
So
really?
Yeah, so there's this big event that happens, and we just get to hear from it from one of our characters. We don't have a point of view inside the room as it all goes down. So, like, them opening with that, it was like, oh, okay, cool. We get to actually see that, which it's the same thing in season one, the first episode, the whole attack on
Hmm.
their little village.
Yeah.
You don't get to see that. You just hear about it. Like,
Yeah.
you end up there and like, oh, this is what happened. So, I mean, I think on one hand, it could be really like, wow, that's a lot. But I think for book people, we were like, oh shit, we get to see it. Like, all right, we're going to watch this now. So I
Okay.
think that was like kind of fun for me. But on the outside, I could see where it would be like, whoa.
With so I've discovered this in I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and a lot of writing on this Winds of Winter like fanfic.
Yeah, and
There's
the
a
new
lot of
book's out.
there's a lot of
Okay.
action oriented chapters, and I find that action is I personally find action and battles very, very difficult to write because you run out of ways to say he slashed his sword and somebody else did something. Like, how many interesting ways can you
Hmm.
make slashing swords and blocking stuff work? And
Right.
so I can understand why Robert Jordan would put that off page, like this huge
Well,
epic battle. It's
yeah, but
hard.
he does and he doesn't in so many instances because like he was a Vietnam veteran and like his like when we're talking about like on the ground battles where it's, like pitched battles, people fighting with swords and stuff, you've always got that going on, but you also have like the magic of it all.
Mm,
And he does write these like incredibly visceral, like just gnarly battles where some of them, I mean, I think personally I've read a lot of fantasy, but some of them are just they're really really good, but they're also like very very dark in where a lot of the story isn't as grim as that, where it's like lighthearted and jokey, but then like you get into these aspects of the Wheel of Time where it's like, oh, okay, like he saw some shit go down in Vietnam and it's like coming out.
I see. I see. Um, let's see. What am I? Oh, another thing that's a bit jarring about this season is there's a lot of flashbacks to previous cycles of the wheel and
Okay.
alternate possibilities maybe, and you get often confused on whether an event happens or not. Um,
Okay.
uh, I want to say there's a scene specifically where Egwene is perhaps having a dream about Rand with his ex, and his ex trying
Okay.
to seduce him, and then you realize that okay, that entire scene didn't happen. It was in Egwene's head. But then
No. Okay.
later on, like Rand gets a vision of her, and she's actually like just there in a projection sense. And because I was like, what is she doing in this area? Ah, okay, no.
Okay, this is an actual whole other location. So now we've entered what is called the world of dreams or Teleron. So this is like,
Oh, I see.
a world where anything of your imagination becomes a reality. And you can either, if you have this talent, you can pull people in there or you can jump in between other people's dreams. So they're just now setting that up to a point where like they're jumping around in it a lot and you get like a line of dialogue and then they're like throwing you into the next scene.
I
So
see. I see.
it's
Yeah.
it could be very confusing.
No, I mean, and I get it. I suppose you're supposed to feel uh, um, the same feeling as the characters. Like, what is real? Can I trust this person? Did this happen? Did this
Hmm.
not? What can I blame Rand for? Um,
Plenty.
right. I mean, like, okay, like, she's trying to seduce Rand, and he actually does try to kiss her, and then you're pulled out of that, and you're like, okay, because now Egwene and Rand are back together. So it's like, do you blame Rand for trying to kiss her in the dream world? Is that something that he's guilty of? I don't know. So
Yeah, I mean, yes, yes. He's not dreaming, but like it's called the world of dreams. He's in a
mm,
real location. It's just not like in the physical world. And this is where the Wheel of Time gets really weird because, like I said, anything that if you have this talent where you can enter, you can pretty much make whatever happen just by like sheer will. And so that's one of these little like mysteries that's kind of put in here where it's like, Egwene, how did you get that bruise on the side of your face? I thought I healed it. And it turns out it's because she's having Lanfear beat the crap out of her, pretending to be this, woman from last season. So,
yeah, Lampier. I mean, I know it's intentional, but Lampier's side, like where she is tough to navigate. Like she doesn't seem to be a dark friend, but she's definitely not a hero. She's
oh, Lanfear is, yeah, she's a interesting one. That's a big like whole book series question. It's like, is she really in this because she really just cares about Rand and wants to break her oaths, or is she actually just a diabolical maniac? And I think it's like somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems pretty clear that like if you're trying to pick baddies, like okay,
Hmm.
it seems pretty clear that Leandrin and her red Aes Sedai are evil,
Black
and
Aes Sedai, yeah.
we get these cut to this woman who's torturing this dude Mogedion or something is her name.
Mo Gideon, yeah.
Mogideon, I'm sorry, Mogideon. Like she
Say it
seemed really
however you
bad,
want.
right? But um other than that, it's tough to know what's going on. There seems to be a split. The Aes Sedai have had a civil war. There's a split. Um, you know, for the most part, bad people look bad and good people look good. But
Yeah. Do you want to know who I think one of my favorite characters introduced this season is the new Red Aja woman that comes in with Elaine's mother. So
oh
the one
yeah,
that comes in with the queen, Elida. Um, this character really is like one of the only really like I would say like super politically savvy characters that comes in and just starts all of the machinations and starts kind of plotting behind the scenes in a way that we haven't gotten yet. And I did find that aspect of her episode really interesting, where, she's feeding information to the one person, knowing that that information is going to be taken to Swan Sanche, and then later, like, pulling another move, getting these other women out of the tower so that she can take over that position, and like a lot of things being set up there in the White Tower. So I think that's one of the locations that felt kind of like even keel for me.
Alida is played by Shohreh uh,
Sheree, yeah, Agdashlu.
Agashlu, who I think most people might know her from The Expanse. She's the very croaky voiced Middle Eastern woman
Yeah,
who they always she's been in everything, but they always have her play like the wife of the terrorist or something. It's always like
yeah,
it's
like
like
House
her
of
always her
Saddam.
role.
Yeah,
Like, oh, we need a Middle Eastern woman who's like over the age of 40. Who do we got? Well, okay,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She was actually kind of like fan casted in a way. That
Oh,
story
really?
is pretty crazy. Yeah, so I mean, way, way back before, they had even released season one, I'm a huge fan of this actress, but there was this character that everyone was saying, like, oh, we need to get her for this role. And the showrunner was like on Twitter, oh, like I heard I'm supposed to talk to this woman. And she responded on Twitter and was like, I'm supposed to talk to you, I guess. And then like the whole fandom was like, holy shit, this is happening. She ended up getting casted for a different role, but it still ended up happening, which was wild.
I always do
Wild.
think it's funny when you find out like that all these actors they end up like trying out for the same roles, and there's actually like reels of them like auditioning
Mm-hmm.
for the other for the other roles and things like that.
Yeah.
But so um yeah, so would you say, and let me ask you this, the
Okay.
is this book wise, is this like the golden period, the juicy period that people love most in the fandom? Because I know that the slog is coming. That's in the future. And
Right.
the Brandon Sanderson tack on is after the slog.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and people say, they always say, oh, you need a couple books to get into Wheel of Time. Is this like the sweet spot? Are we in the sweet spot of the book series?
Yeah, I would say most fans, I think, put this book that this season is covering as their favorite. I think it's arguably probably the best written in terms of payoff because we've got all of these characters splitting up, like you said, new groups going out doing different things. Each location with each group gets like this massive setup and then massive payoff at the end.
Mm,
And then it ends in this kind of like a cliffhanger in a way, like this big moment where it's like, oh God, now I got to see what happens. Let's keep
yeah.
going. But a lot of like pieces being moved around where you get like a definite climax to those stories of those characters. So I think it's probably one of the most well written. Not my favorite, but
Yeah.
arguably best written.
Which one's your favorite?
Oh, I think it's just more of like a nostalgia thing, but I think The Great Hunt,
Mm.
just because that's where it goes from being like everything before that feels very like Tolkien in nature, like, sleepy little village. Now we're on an adventure. And then The Great Hunt kind of becomes
I
more in
also, I
line with
mean,
how Robert Jordan writes.
the first book is also so very Rand oriented. I think half, if more than half of the POV chapters are Rand in the first book, and
Yeah.
it's not quite an ensemble cast yet, where you sort of like care and feel about anyone besides Rand, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and so I think at this point, like the successful thing about the season is you're getting to the point where you actually feel like you know the characters, the shuffle happens, and it's really fun because you're now seeing these new characters interacting with each other in different ways.
Yeah.
There's just little things like there was a scene where the head Aes Sedai woman that was banging Rosamund Pike, and
Yeah.
Matt have,
Swan.
yeah, and Matt have a scene, and it's just like a very enjoyable scene of these two people like chatting about the
Yeah.
horn, and it's just really
Yeah.
fun. These two characters that you'd never think would have interacted before are interacting, and it's a very interesting, fun interaction. So
That
that
was
was,
one of my favorites, I think, as
yeah,
well. Just, Matt being kind of a goofball and her like, very, very like gentle parenting him, like, see this horn, not such a great
yeah.
idea to be like showing it off. And he's like, yeah, yeah, you're right.
I would never
But
do that.
yeah,
And people, I mean, Matt's like the fan favorite, isn't he? Um,
I for a lot of people, yeah.
just because he's the troublemaker. Uh,
Yeah, he's the lovable scamp.
it's weird that they've gone from, at least the show, and I don't know how this is. Well, I would say it was very different in the book because in the first book, Matt is pretty innocent and pure, while in the show they make him a dark troublemaker from the start. And then the dagger happens and all that, and then he gets
Yeah,
so
yeah.
dark and painful, and you're just like, and now he seems somewhat normal again. I mean, yeah, he's supposedly troubled, but he's now a goofball. He's 100% goofball this season, and so he's very fun to watch. Well, he was more suffering dude before this. So
Suffering guy.
yeah, so you kind of had he was in the show. You kind of had suffering dude even before um,
Yeah.
the dagger. I would say like
Hmm.
um, you know, and like and then he's suffering, and now he's like fun goofball in the book. And I only read the first book, but the first book he's just kind of innocent and funny, and then I imagine the dagger thing makes him dark, but
Right.
you know.
He doesn't really. So when I read it, I didn't quite connect with his character maybe until like the third book, but I kept hearing from people like, Matt, like he's the best character of them all. He's so great. And I'm like, I can't stand this guy. I don't know what his problem is. And then you finally start to get that like lighthearted aspect to him after he blows the horn and he's a little bit like,
So
you
it's
know, like,
you're saying it's the horns influence that suddenly made him into
mm,
a enjoyable character because
well, like, not so much like the horns influence, but just after the effects of that, like, he still has troubles, but he starts to kind of get more agency as a character where he's off kind of doing his own things, grouping up with new people, like Tom Marilyn, our
Hmm.
Glee Man guy. That combination is very buddy cop in a very enjoyable way because, older guy, kind of a gruff older dude, and then this young goofball who keeps getting into trouble. So,
um I you know who I miss is Ishmael. Ishamel. Sorry.
oh,
And it may just because the actor for him was so good. Ferris.
he's
He's
cast for this season. He's on
is
the poster.
so
So,
he's gonna come back in some sort of, because they keep talking about him being dead. He's dead. He's dead. He's starting
yeah.
to go dark when he's not. Um, but he was perhaps the highlight. I mean, he was hardly in season one, but he was perhaps the highlight of season two. Now he's gone, and you're like, oh, that's too.
I
He's such a fun. He's such a fun guy. He's such a fun
he's
guy.
he's probably I mean, he's really the best of the Forsaken, and, like, I mean, he's got that, like, calm intensity to him, and I mean, the actor on top of that, he's really funny too, like, very playful in a way, but having him gone, I think, is really interesting seeing the dynamic of the Forsaken now because they're like squabbling idiots without him being there to like,
Yeah, I mean, he was the face of the Forsaken,
yeah,
right? He was the big bad, and without him, you're kind of like. I even asked this earlier in a discussion. I was like, "Wait, who are the evil people again?" I mean, obviously, Leandrin and this, yeah, the woman with the impossible name to pronounce, Mosh
Mo Gideon, yeah,
Mogideon. Right, there's a
yeah.
bunch of G's and H's and stuff. And yes,
Even the audiobook narrators can't get it right sometimes, so don't
yeah.
feel bad.
I'm glad they gave the finger cuffed Aes Sedai, the Aes Sedai in the three way. I'm glad that they
Mm.
gave her husband, or follower, whatever they call him. I'm sorry, he's both, right?
Warder, yeah,
Warder, his
yeah, her
warder
warder.
husband. I'm
That
glad
I
they gave him
mean,
a. You're saying
yeah,
that that was an
kinda.
off-screen death? They had off-screen death
No,
killed him?
they killed him in the beginning
Right,
during
right. But
that
I'm saying in
battle.
the book, you're saying that that was all off page.
Oh, um, he yeah, his death is I think it's off page in the books. It doesn't happen then during that battle. It happens, like, I'm pretty sure while they're out in the two rivers killing Trollocs.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
but still off page, which is funny
Yeah.
because it's like, because their relationship is so, alluring. Like, you're like, whoa, do you exist in a three way marriage? That's what's going on? Like, because you as characters, they actually draw much more attention than the number of lines they have.
Mhm.
I think, but because of that, you're like, and so when his death happened, he may have been the only person I really cared about dying in that huge
In
battle.
that scene.
Right,
Yeah.
because everybody else is like nameless Aes Sedai, nameless Aes Sedai. I don't know who's dying. You know, columns are falling, shit. Stuff's blowing up. Magic is getting shot. Whatever, you
Yeah.
know. And so when he dies, he's the pain you feel and the loss you
Mhm.
feel for that battle. So I'm glad that they took something off page and put it on page. But
Yeah. I mean, Alana, I would say Alana, his Aes Sedai, um, very different character in the books and just kind of, in my opinion, a lot more of like a throwaway character. She's very important to the story, as time goes on, but like there's a very flat character, in
hmm,
my opinion. I really enjoy this actress that plays her, but
Priyanka Bose.
Bose, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, interesting nonetheless. But I suppose it was a good choice. You know, they're like, who can we kill off around the right time to actually have some impact, to have the scene have impact. But
Yeah.
there was one thing that kind of it was an important scene and it kind of fell flat for me. Um,
Okay.
and it's not the show's fault, but they're like okay, they're presented with two choices. Like Rosamund Pike wants to take Rand to place one, and
Mhm.
everyone else wants them to go home to Two Rivers, right? And he then is like, no, we're gonna go
Fake
to
out.
the fake out, and we're gonna go to nameless gibberish, right? We've never fucking heard of this place. So when the reveal
We
comes, you're like,
have.
like
I
I mean,
mean, they set it up last season
okay,
with Avienda, these women from the Aiel Waste with their kind of like
right.
desert ninja garb on.
The Fremen,
And
the nice, yeah, the Fremen women.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. I love how I'm not trying to like poke fun at Robert Jordan too hard here, but I know he's been asked like, was that an inspiration? He was like, no, absolutely not. And we're like, okay, okay, sure.
Okay, sure.
But this event going to their Aiel like land in the desert happens later in the books, and I see what they're doing and why they're doing it, and they're moving this. So what should have happened first to a later date, because I mean, eventually, like, I think it'll all make sense and it'll actually be a good change because he's got to pull this like magical like sword from the stone, very Arthurian legend. And so he needs this army. He's got to get like his warriors and stuff. And this whole event, oh man. So now I'm like a little bit worried for you because because the events that happen while they're there, there's like this big trial and it's very like weird, flashing through time, seeing different events happen through his ancestors' eyes, going back further and further in time. And I'm worried, and not just like for you, but people who have no connection to the books, if they're going to be able to understand the significance of all of it, because it's really powerful, but it's also, if you're not paying attention, it's going to confuse people. So like this is something I'm really like waiting and excited
Yeah.
for at the same time.
You know, what's funny is I almost find the meta narrative outside of Wheel of Time to be um, more interesting than the plot of Wheel of Time itself. Because,
Okay.
because when Wheel of Time began, as you're saying, like in the first book, it's this classic kind of fantasy tale. And then the tale becomes more complicated and dark. But part of it's Robert Jordan, but part of it is that was the trend of fantasy literature over that period of time. And Wheel of Time was written over this long period of time, so it exists on the transition.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and so, and then we're putting things to screen, and they're put to screen at a time when Game of Thrones started, and you want things to look like that. But now Game of Thrones is done, and and COVID happens, and now we're getting out of COVID, and there's all this money dumped on the show, and there's all these like little things like that like I
Yeah.
feel really that affects the art. Like the real world affects the art, and other things in the world
Mm.
affect the art so much. Um, that it's just kind of it's fascinating to me, like these little changes like that. um
Yeah, do you wanna know something that's kind of humorous? You know how
mm,
Perrin has, like, his wolf thing going on?
yeah.
When this was pitched and they're, in the writing process, they're taking this information back to Amazon and like, okay, like here's this guy, he's got this connection to these wolves, he can talk to them, and they were like, no, 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 like we can't have that. Like Game of Thrones, like we don't want to do this again. How about like let us propose bears? Like let him talk to
They wanted to switch
bears.
the animals.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of
Yeah.
takes away from the whole like hunting aspect and tracking and all of that. I mean, bears just aren't known for that.
Yeah, but like you said though, like it's in a transitional time where I think everything post Game of Thrones is always going to be compared to Game of Thrones in, the realm of fantasy. But
It's
I
very
think
see, I would say now, like first season, I would definitely say, oh, they were trying to mimic Game of Thrones. But now the scenery is so vivid, um, and the jumps so fast, and so much happening at once. The tone is now completely different. It's a very different show than it was season one. Um, and so it's definitely an evolving show. And even if I do think some of the characters can be a bit stilted, like they're in these incredible environments where I'm like, and wearing these insane costumes where I can't be like, you know, I mean, Rosamund Pike is incredible. She's always going to be incredible. But even if she like, even if she had nothing to say, she's walking across like this barren rock desert area wearing this ridiculous floppy hat, and you're just like, oh, Rosamund.
I mean yeah, like this is I don't know. It's just I'm still thinking about like what you said about how like post Game of Thrones and things, there's still always going to be that almost influence there in terms of like it's always going to be compared to it regardless of like how different it is just
Mm,
because it's in the fantasy genre. But I think this is the season where and I can say this like pretty confidently. I've watched the full season, but it really takes a very different turn from the like typical fantasy that I think a lot of people are expecting. And even, not at just being like with the costuming and stuff like that, but just in the way that things get very sci-fi this season, which
yeah.
I personally really appreciate because it was one of the aspects where I was reading it. I wasn't even sure if I was going to finish it, to be honest. Like I started it wanting a series that was completed because I had finished A Song of Ice and Fire, still waiting on George. And I was like, all right, what's a big series that I can sink my teeth into that's done? And
Yeah.
so I picked that up. And as it starts out, it's like, okay, very kind of like the Hobbit sort of feeling, and then starts to get a little bit darker. And then you've got these like weird science fiction elements going into it. Like this World of Dreams place can be like a really interesting location for like battle, but almost not like visually, but like the battle of will and minds, I guess. And then what happens during Rand's journey where he's leading to now is like very like bizarre but also pretty cool.
Hmm.
It's just like I said though, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, and we've got 8 episodes to like just like throw it at people and hope that they understand and can keep up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think it's definitely not one of those shows that you can kind of watch in the background. You have to be sitting there paying attention, um,
Yeah.
just to deal with all the names and everything. It's got to be. Uh, it's one of the one you also like. A lot of times there's you watch a show and they're like previously on, and you're like, I can skip this. I think, but you kind of do need the previously on with the Wheel of Time. Um,
Yeah.
it's just yeah, it's a lot. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's well, it's good that we're entering it's the golden period. The wheel is turning to the golden period. So you're pretty happy with this season. Do you think it's the best season so far?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's much more in line with like the tone of the books, but also it and this is just my opinion. I'm basing this nothing on, besides vibes, right?
Yeah.
Like, but it sincerely feels like they gave the showrunner and like the entire team, writers, like they just let them tell the story as they wanted rather than like interference. We're like wolves, no, we need bears,
Yeah.
stuff like this, where I could see season one, it did feel like really dark, like not, visually, but like the tone of it for whatever reason. And I don't know if that was an intentional thing by like outside influence being like, yeah, like a little bit more like Game of Thrones, like make it a little bit more edgy or something like that. We don't know, but
The Here's an interesting thing that I noticed and it's about the human relationships and the romantic aspects of the human relationships
mm,
because um Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire, there's a lot of sex. There is. But when you're really talking about relationships, um, besides like Jamie and Cersei, like a lot of the relationships kind of happen fast. Like the Egret relationship is, kind of over and done in half a book, like
yeah.
and and Brienne and Jamie, they get as well, like, they get a book to kind of build this sexual tension up, and then they're not together, and so
Mhm.
I had heard that Robert Jordan wasn't great at writing women, um, that this is like a famous thing, but the show has
Yeah,
spent a lot
divisive.
of time on these relationships, romantic relationships, um, even perhaps creating romantic relationships, like you said. Okay, there's no way in the book that there's any land marine like romance, but on screen, at least in seasons 1 and 2, they definitely created some sexual tension between them, and added like, and they bickered like an old couple. um Rand and Egwene have,
Off and then
they're off,
on and
yeah,
off
they're
and
off and on,
on.
off and
Yeah.
on. Is there as much focus on the romance in the books, or is this a show kind of creation?
So, in terms of like romantic relationships, a lot of them very in line with what you're talking about with like John and Egret, where like people will share like two chapters together, and then the next book you realize like, oh, they're in love with each other.
Uh,
Okay. All right. Interesting. And
like
so
like for instance, Elaine and the Fremen girl like get together, and
so
then and that's just like, it just seems like a fling. They only had a second, right?
okay, this is also very divisive. Oh god. So this again, it's very open to interpretation because in the books they are I don't know how to say this without spoilers. Let me try. They're probably the closest to characters in terms of like their connection to one another. When I read the books, I wholeheartedly believed they were in love with each other and like they were a thing. But Robert Jordan doesn't write sex scenes. You get this kind of like a fade to black, like someone having a discussion about
Mm.
something and then it kind of like fades to black. So it's always felt a little bit ambiguous to me, and I always just interpreted that as like he wants to say like these women are in love with each other, but because of it being the early 90s, I'm not just going to come out and say like, yeah, these two chicks were banging, you know?
Fascinating.
Same with
Because
like Moraine and Swan
it's almost
Sanche.
inverted of Ice and Fire. Because in Ice and Fire, you get the sex, but you don't necessarily get the love and the relationship. Like Asha, we have a great fucking sex scene between Asha and Carl the Maid. But how does Asha really feel about Carl the Maid? We don't really know. You know,
Right.
like
Yeah.
we get a sex scene between Sam and Gilly. But you know how much you know. There's a few places here and there where Sam thinks about Gilly, but like you know, and how, but you don't really get like their loving connection. Yeah.
Right.
And so here
Yeah.
you're saying the reverse, that you're getting the loving connection, but he doesn't have any of the sex.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah. It, Elaine and Avienda might be like one of my favorite like pairings just because of how like intense their feelings are for one another and just how relentlessly each one of them has each other's back like no matter what like to the death. They will follow each other everywhere essentially, and the way that it's handled in the books, a lot of people just assume they are meant to be like, like the joke, like they were roommates, like, like they were just very good platonic friends, and
Mm-mm.
whatever the
Beef fry,
interpretation,
street ends. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, whatever the interpretation is for whatever person, I think you can kind of say whatever it is you want it to say and you're not wrong, but
But it's also safe, you know, because there's an entire audience out there that is going to take, you know, a same sex relationship and be and if it's overt, be like, well, we can't read this. This book is gay, you know.
right,
We're going to keep this
right.
away from keep. And Wheel of Time was huge among teenagers,
Mhm.
and yeah, you know, you're eliminating a huge audience when you make it over like that. And Robert Jordan was very focused on his bread and butter and keeping it going.
Yeah, I mean, it is very obvious that there are some things in there. He wanted to be cheeky and he wanted to kind of like put this type of thing in. Moraine and Swan Sanche, they are gay lovers in the prequel. Like the author has came out and been like, yes, like they have sex in this time period. But a lot of people don't read that book. And so like when they see it on screen, it's like
Where did this come from? Yeah.
heads exploding, but it's not always, like just where did it come from? It's people who take issue with it being
Mm,
gay. So
mm,
it's like
mm.
you're damned if you don't. It's
Yeah.
a lot of intense feelings.
Well, I mean, the thing that makes the world real. I mean, the real world has these types of people. So of course, like a fantasy world should
Right.
have these types of people. This is one of these things where like I rail against Star Wars. How Star Wars doesn't have you know any sex and it has very little romance. And you're just like, how is a fantasy world less fantastical than
How
real?
are they procreating?
How do they
Where are they coming from?
I know, I know. Well, anyway, I have heard my son coming home from
It's
school, so
time.
we have to cut our session short. But we will talk again when episodes 4, 5, and 6 come out. Are they coming out weekly? They're coming out in batches of 3. They're coming out weekly.
Weekly now.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we'll talk again when episode 4.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you, Amber, for joining me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.